Excellent. Okay. Does anybody here, well, let me just ask the big question. Has anyone here actually read the book of Job? Oh, you have? Okay, very good, Parker. Uh, the so not a lot of people do. It's not a real popular book. It's a pretty horrific story. It's about a guy who has this firm, very strong belief in God, and according to the story, the Satan, who is the prosecuting angel, comes up to God and says, "Listen, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but take everything away from Job, and he won't believe in you anymore." God says, "All right, let's try it. Let's see what happens." So basically, they essentially take. He's a very rich man, has a lot of stuff, big family. Take everything away from him, ends up going broke, kills off his entire family, gives him boils, similar to the Egyptian story. And yet somehow or another, he retains his faith, but keeps asking, why in the world is this happening to me? And there are a number of people that come up to Job and explain to him why these are happening to him. Everything from he must have done something wrong at some time. And then surprisingly, at the end of the story, everything comes back. His family comes back and, things of that sort. So there's a little happy dope. The question is, what in the world is that story about? Did it really happen? Is there really a person, Job? And as the source material says, there are, as I said, there's no less than 11 opinions, at least, as to where Job lived, whether he was Jewish or not Jewish, whether he even existed at all. So nobody really knows. But we're going to, the Midrash is actually going to locate Job and put him in this Exodus story. It's kind of like all of a sudden Job now magically appears. So first, what I want to do is I took some sections from Jobs and put it in there. So I'm going to first, actually, I'm going to first do is just get it up on my screen. So give me just a moment here and let me do that real quick. Here we go. Okay. All right. I'll share my screen so everyone can at least see a copy of this. Okay. So we're going to take some quick look, Job. What I want you to do as we're doing this, see if you can, by some chance, see any connection between Job's story and the Exodus from Egypt. There are a couple of things that I bolded. There are a couple of concepts that I've already bolded, so you can see some obvious connections. There may be some others. So in chapter 1, verse 1, it just starts, there is a man in the land of Uz named Job. That man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. Yep, that's the introduction. By the way, his Hebrew name is Eov, and I didn't kind of go into that. His possessions a big one, were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of ox, and 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she asses, and a very large household. The man was wealthier than anyone in Egypt. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the she asses were grazing among them. When the Sabians attacked them, carried them off, and put the boys to the sword, I alone have escaped to tell you. So at the very beginning, chapter 1, as soon as we start off in chapter 14 verses after we find out he's a wonderful person, all of his material objects have been taken off, and all his sons and workers have been killed. The one still speaking when another came up, God's fire from heaven, keep that in mind, took hold the sheep and the boys and burned them. I alone have escaped to tell you. This one speaking when another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their firstborn brother, when suddenly a mighty wind came from the wilderness. It struck the four corners of the house, so it collapsed among the young people, and they died. I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, tore his robe off, cut off his hair, threw himself on the ground and worshiped. And he says, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there, which, by the way, is a very interesting phrase because it's done at funerals. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. This is where it comes from. Blessed be the name of the Lord. If you didn't know where that verse comes from, it comes from the book of Job. For all that, Job did not sin, nor did he cast reproach of God. Okay, so Job, everything's bad happened, doesn't say anything bad about God. And then in chapter 2, verse 7, the adversary, which, by the way, in Hebrew is Hasatan. That is the name of this. That's where the word Satan comes from. In Judaism, Satan is a prosecuting angel. It is not a devil. But that's just kind of keep that in mind. The adversary departed from the presence of the Lord and inflicted severe boils on Job. Same word here, by the way, shechin, which is one of the 10 plagues, shechin, on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Now, keep something in mind. Not only has Job lost everything, everyone's dead, but now that he has boils, the one interesting thing about this, and the way some of the commentaries say it, that he is not only that, but he now has this one disease which is very contagious. So now he has to be totally alone. Ellen, hold on for a second. Now he has to be totally alone. He took a potsherd to scratch himself as he sat in ashes. His wife said to him, "You still keep your integrity, blaspheme God and die." But he said to her, "You talk as any shameless woman might talk. Should we only accept good from God and not accept evil? For all that, Job said nothing sinful." So that's the Job story. That's the interesting thing about Job. Yes, Ellen.
There were 3 different stories as to what happened to his children and all his possessions, and they were conflicting. Why was
different people were in different spots. He had a very large household. There's one group that got killed from the attackers. Another group got burned. Another one, the house fell down. It doesn't right now in this what we're doing. It doesn't matter how they died. Here's the point. Why did God? Here's the question. Why does God put Job through this? That's going to be the question. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. That's the question we're going to answer. And it has to do with the exodus from Egypt. So there's 2 midrashim we're going to talk about that explicitly place Job in Pharaoh's court. And we can learn something about this. Okay, so where do they put it? In the Talmud, in Sotah 11a, it said Rabbi Chia bar Abba, said Rabbi Simai, 3 were consulted by Pharaoh in that council. And this is like when Pharaoh decided he was going to kill the firstborn, there were 3 people that were part of his advisors. Bilam, the guy who cursed, it says the Matovu later on, Job, and Jethro. Bilam, who hatched the plan, was killed. Just saying what what it says in the Midrash. Job, who was silent, was punished by suffering. Jethro, who ran away, merited that some of his children sat in the chamber of the hewn stone. So here's the question, folks. We're talking about Pharaoh's plan to kill the firstborn. So it says the one who walks away is Jethro. By the way, Jethro in the Torah is Moses' father-in-law. He kind of removes himself from Pharaoh's court. Can someone just walk away from evil? If someone knows that someone's going to commit something, should they walk away? And what level of culpability do you think Jethro had? Put it another way, was there a way for Jethro to have stayed and remained clean? Yeah, Ellen.
Well, we have a cousin who, after Trump got elected, is moving to Portugal with his family.
Yeah, but he's not in contact. He's not in contact with Trump.
No, he's removing himself. Can't stand it. So he's.
But leaving. There are a lot of I know a lot of. Unfortunately, I do know some families that are doing that. Actually, I knew a family that did it way before the election because they knew it was going to happen. However they knew. The question is there a way for Jethro
to be punished? I don't know.
Should Jethro had said something? Now, Bilam, Bilam is the one who hatches the plot to enslave the Israelites, and also to curse them. So it makes sense that he's punished. When Bilam tries to curse the Israelites and he says Matovu, nothing really happens to him, but he ends up at the end of the story, much later in the Tanakh, he ends up getting punished. But Job does nothing. So Job essentially just doesn't do anything. So the question is, why is he punished? So do you think that this Midrash is saying that because Job does nothing, he's complicit in what Pharaoh tried to do? That's the question. Do you think he's complicit in this? Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, sorry, I've been sick and also I got a job, so I'm not always here on Tuesdays, but today I'm not at work,
That's
so I want
perfect. That's
yeah.
fine.
I'm not sure. What did Job, I know I missed it. So what did Job do that he was complicit by watching? What exactly did he watch and not say about?
What he did, according to the Midrash, now mind you, if you, I don't, you missed the first part. Job is the one in the Bible that he loses everything.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So he doesn't do anything, and that's just it. He just he was silent. So the
In what
question is,
aspect in the Midrash? Like what was the scene
he
that
didn't
he was
tell Pharaoh
silent?
not to kill the firstborn. He doesn't do anything. When Pharaoh said, "I'm going to kill the Israelite firstborn," according to this bill, according to the Midrash, anyways, Bilam, who thought of the plan, he ends up being killed, but he ends up being killed much later in the story in the Bible. Job ends up being punished through this punishment that we saw in the book of Job. In Jethro, nothing happens. So the
And
question
Job
is,
was around at that time? Job was
oh,
around.
was Jethro around? That's even a better question. I keep in mind so it's interesting. Parker says he's a bystander and is not standing up for what's right. It gives those doing the evil the ability to do evil because they're being allowed to do so. So nobody says anything. Nobody's saying anything. And that's the issue. I mean, Job doesn't do anything. And so therefore he's punished by losing everything. This is the connection. But there's a little more to it. The story of Exodus in the question 3 is an interesting thing. The story of Exodus that we know focuses on Moses and the slaves, but this adds a new angle. All of a sudden, now we're in the politics of Pharaoh's court. Why is that important to know what happened in Pharaoh's court? I mean, why is it important to know, what happened? And then the last question, what can thinking about this tell us about evil and authority in our own time? I can't say the word. What does that tell us? What should what should people do when they are in not a position to receive the information, but people within the Pharaoh's court? Shouldn't they be doing something? Or are they complicit in what's going on? Is what the question. Oh, I like that. 2 sides to every story. We only get one side of the Exodus story. Well, you're right. We only get one side of the Exodus story. So it's interesting. The original, the 10 Commandments, the Cecil B. DeMille, and the Christopher Bale one, I think it's just called Exodus. But whatever it's called, but it's I think it's called, both of them show a little bit of Pharaoh's court, but they show everybody just kind of like going along with it. No one's saying anything about it. Now, we know Pharaoh has a different position than many other leaders in our country currently, but shouldn't they have said anything? So now, mind you, the Midrash is going to give us an answer. These aren't rhetorical questions all the time. But the big question is, why was Job punished? That's the biggie, and that's the one I kind of want to focus on. Oh, thank you. Gods and Kings. Yes, that was the name of the movie. Thank you. That's the one with Christopher Bale. All right. The Torah thinks that redemption is a good thing, but it doesn't mean there's no collateral damage. All of Egypt is destroyed, including crops and animals, despite Pharaoh being the main instigator. This is highlighted in the following Midrash. So the idea is we know there's a Midrash that when the armies of Pharaoh were flooded, and all the army was killed, we're told the angels started singing. God tells them not to sing because it's his children that are dying. So we take a drop of wine out of there to show that during the Passover Seder, to show that we're sad because other people had to die for our freedom. But it's more than that. Take a look at this. In Shemot Rabbah, in the Midrash for the book of Exodus, chapter 21, number 7, said Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, when Israel was leaving Egypt, the angel Samael. Now, the angel Samael is another name for Satan, by the way.
Oh, wow.
The angel Samael or Satan came to argue against them. So then, in other words, this angel's arguing to God, don't free them. Rabbi Chana ben Chanina explained this in the name of his father as a parable. A shepherd was crossing his sheep across the river, and a wolf came to attack them. What does an experienced shepherd do? He takes a big old goat, hands it over to the wolf, thinking, let the wolf struggle with the goat. This will buy us time to cross the river, and then I will go back and get the goat. Similarly, when Israel left Egypt, the angel Samael came to argue against them in God's presence. He said to the master of the universe, these people were idolaters. You're going to split the sea for them? What did God do? God handed him Job, who was one of Pharaoh's advisors, for he was complete and honest. God said to him, I hereby hand him over to you. God thought, while Samael is dealing with Job, Israel can make it through the sea, and then I will go back to get Job. Now remember, at the end of the story of Job, everything comes back. So, the Midrash suggests that God does not hand Job over to Satan for just any old job, as the book suggests, kind of like, he just ends up doing it, but rather for the greater good to save the Israelites. What do you think about this?
I think a lot about that because it speaks personally to me, because my mom got sick when I was very young, and at 11 years old, she asked me to finish raising my 3 younger siblings. And when that happened, when she had MS, so when she became wheelchair bound, when I was about the age of 18, I took care of my siblings for the next 20 years, whatever, like definitely for the next 15 years, because they were young. And let me tell you, I gave up all my 20s, and that was a very crucial part of your life, your 20s. That's when everything happens. And I feel like I got punished because they're all their lives are, and God bless them, good eye to them. I'm not saying it. I blood, sweat, and tears to help them have their good lives. But, and now I'm, left with all the, the pain and, and all that stuff. But that's okay. I've settled it. I'm just saying, but I identify with that because I'm like, why did I suffer? What did I do? I was just born the first child, and I was told, let me help everybody else, and I helped everybody else. And what do you do? I guess there's one.
Could you tell me who's talking? Because with all the reading, I can't see who's talking.
Angela Bolero.
Angela's talking.
But bottom line is the answer. What you're saying is that sometimes the one person has to suffer for the many, for the many lives. Why did I have to suffer to do it? I did it. All the many lives. Now my mom died in peace. My father's really happy. My siblings are married with their children. The grandchildren are now getting old, that they're going to have children. All these lives I affected. God knows what else. So sometimes one person has to suffer for the many, especially the good person. Usually it's the good person that has to suffer. You would think the bad person, but no, it's the good person has to suffer for the many, and that's just the way it is.
Angela, that is very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That's a Job share. I mean, that's really kind of cool. Yes, Ellen.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. You don't have any burden of guilt, which if you had not helped, you would have had that. And I felt the same way with my parents and my in-laws. For a number of years when they were failing, I was really the one who was the helper. And it was most of my time and energy, which I could have done, I could have worked, I could have done other things, but I spent my time taking care of my failing parents and in-laws. And I don't regret it because I don't feel guilty. I did what I could. And I think that makes a big difference. You don't need to carry a burden of guilt if you fail your family.
This is interesting. Parker has summed it up philosophically. Mm-hmm. It's because the good person can handle the responsibility, whereas someone else would completely break.
Right.
I mean, it's got a lot of truth to that. But there's also another lesson that the Midrash points out. It pushes us to realize, and that's number 3, that if the only redemption we can stomach is one in which no one gets hurt, then we really don't want redemption at all. There's no such thing as redemption without violence. We can mourn the suffering, but this should not eclipse the fact that it was required for freedom. Now, what do you think? Because that's the ultimate thing, that redemption, in even the Exodus from Egypt required some collateral damage, so to speak, and that's required for, for freedom. There's an interesting statement. Let's see. I just want to get to Parker said, I say that as one who had to take care of my mom. I'm the youngest, and my brother and sister would not have been able to, not because they're bad, but because they're not capable of handling it. That's thank you. That's
Thank you, Parker.
wonderful to share. Thanks for sharing that. We have this idea that when we talk about the exodus from Egypt, that everybody left happily ever after, and yet we know that that's not true. I mean, there's a lot of issues that come about, and a lot of times that, I think, God and Moses are kind of unfair. They bring people out to the wilderness after being, literally, into some kind of slavery, work, yes, whatever, but never outside in the real world. And then they're always they get mad when they start complaining about being hungry and thirsty. And if they're out in the middle of the desert, it was like, what did you expect them to do? It just, so it's like that redemption or freedom, whatever, has some collateral damage, and it's required. There's no one has been able to get free without some collateral damage. And we see that in, we see that in the current Gaza war. We've seen it in other wars that America's been part of. Those, oh, that's what I was going to say, Deb. In a MASH episode, Hawkeye Pierce says something. Oh no, Hawkeye Pierce is upset that one of his patients dies, one of his patients that he's working on, and Colonel Blake goes over to him and says that one thing I was taught in officer school is that in war, young men die and doctors can't prevent that. So, I mean, it's like, yes, there is collateral damage and all sorts of different things, and maybe we need to keep that in mind. Yes, Ellen, go ahead. You got your hand up, so I presume that's.
Yeah. I was going to comment on the war thing. When we go to war, there's a lot of collateral damage. A lot of people get killed in wars, and we shouldn't be so eager to do that if we can keep our freedom without going into physical fighting. And in planning wars, you should worry about collateral damage, because you don't want so many of your people and you don't want people to be lots and lots of people to be killed, to have a lot of collateral damage. There should be more diplomacy. If you can manage without having people get killed, do that, because that's not good. But you do that, and people are proud of their military. If they join the military, they're proud of what they've done, but this collateral damage thing, I think, should be minimized if you can.
We'll recommend you for a job in the State Department, because I think they can use you right now. But I think there's a lot to be said for that. But also the fascinating thing about how Midrash works, the teachers, the sages of the Midrash, looked at the Bible as a whole. In Torah study, we take like one or two verses or a story and talk on a Saturday morning and talk about the particular Torah portion. And even when we teach it in school, we'll teach like a certain story. In the next month or two, the kids will learn about Queen Esther once again. Esther, Mordecai, Haman, the whole Purim story. But it's just like looking at that one story. How does that affect the rest of the entire Bible? Which it does, in fact. And so, as the rabbis look at it, as they look at Torah, they look at Tanakh. It's not just the Torah. It's not just the 5 books of Moses. It's also the prophets. It's also the writings. The book of Job is part of the writings. That's the 3rd section of the Jewish Bible. And it's not read a lot. It's a very difficult book to read, that one in Daniel, because a lot of it just doesn't make sense to us. And we have to look at different ways to make sense. And one of the questions that they had is, why would Job have been punished? And they figured, well, of course, he was sitting there in Pharaoh's court, didn't say anything. So he was actually rewarded, by God letting him go to Satan, do whatever it needed to do. And then God came to get him afterwards. How that makes sense or not is a whole different issue than whether it happened or not. But it's how they look at everything, that everything is part of the totality, that it's not just one story and then we just jump to the next. So that it on on studies of Midrash and stuff like that. And we'll continue again next week. Anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts, insults? Yeah,
That
Angela.
was so insightful. I never realized that. I gotta tell my rabbi about this. That the Midrash is looking at the Tanakh not as each story, but how they kind of are on a multiverse together, as you're saying.
Right. And so, I mean, there are different midrashim about specific stories, like how, what happened to Abraham for the first 75 years. We meet him when he's 75, but it's the midrash that fills in the story. And in all sorts of different things, the Adam and Eve story, the fact that Adam had a first wife, Lilith. I mean, where does that come from? All of these stories are there to create an understanding of the whole, not just the specific story. So, and that's why the Midrash is just volumes. It's not just one book. It's just volumes. Today this is Shemot Rabbah, which is a whole different one, different Midrash than some of the others. Yes, Ellen.
Yeah, I do not go along with why do bad things happen to good people that you're punished. You can be punished even though you're very good because you did something bad that causes your punishment. I don't think that always happens. I think it's a big question mark. That the rabbis have to say that because it was Job who was in Pharaoh's court.
They don't say that. Harold Kushner says that. But
but I think he leaves it as a question mark. Why bad things happen to good people? They don't say it's because you did something wrong in your life one time, and that's why you're being punished. I don't agree with. I really don't.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that. But that was that part of it that if you do something wrong, it'll catch up to you, or karma, whatever you want to call it. That's been around. Oh, I think since people started thinking. Because not only is the Midrash, the Gemara is full of that. I mean, if something happens to you, they'll say, "What did you do in the past?" And you jaywalked.
Do you agree with that?
No, not at all.
God is going to punish you if you did something wrong 15 years ago. It's going to come back and kill you. You don't.
No, I don't. I don't at all. I don't, because that's a whole different way.
It was the point of the whole thing, though. The nucleus of everything was the fact that there has to be one to suffer for the many. Is that the point of it today?
No, I think the point is that redemption had collateral damage, and that's something we have to keep in mind when we think about the Exodus. I mean, they wanted to put Job in the story, and that's how they did it. I don't know the mindset of the particular individuals that created the story, especially to say that Bilam was punished because he comes in later in the book of Numbers, and then later again in the book of Chronicles. So I mean, we don't know what I don't know how they came up with that. And then Jethro, I didn't realize Jethro was never in Egypt, according to the Torah. Anyways, Moses meets him when he goes to Midian. So. I'm not saying that. I think the point of the story, or the point of this midrash, anyways, is that redemption has collateral damage. That's really the point. Parker ends up, and I'll make this the last comment. Job has to go through difficult times, even though he's faithful to God. All the patriarchs also go through their struggles and they were faithful to God. I beg to differ. Jacob was not. We are human. To experience the full spectrum of life, we must experience both the good and the bad, and still have faith. That's very good. By the way, we can have a discussion about Jacob when we see each other again, because I don't think that's very true. Anyways, that's just me, and that's it for today, folks. So I thank you for
thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week.
Have a good week.
Take care, folks. Bye.